Jose Rizal was only 16 when he first fell in love, and it was with Segunda, a girl from Batangas and 2 years his junior. Rizal had gone to Manila one day to visit his grandmother. His friend, Mariano, accompanied him. Mariano's family were close with Rizal's grandmother, and his sister Segunda was there along with other guests. Rizal was drawn to her instantly. Some of the guests knew that Rizal was a skilled painter and asked him to draw a portrait of Segunda. He obliged, and reluctantly worked on a pencil sketch of the girl. From time to time, she looked at me, and I blushed. According to Rizal, she had eyes that were eloquent and ardent at times and languid at others, rosy-cheeked, with an enchanting and provocative smile. Unfortunately, Segunda was already engaged to be married, and although Rizal had gotten hints of the lady's affection for him, he timidly decided to back away. Years later, Segunda married her betrothed. Ended, at an early hour, my first love, Rizal recalled 3 years later. My virgin heart will always mourn the reckless step it took on the flower-decked abyss. My illusions will return, yes, but indifferent, uncertain, ready for the first betrayal on the path of love. When Rizal was a sophomore at the UST, he met Leonor Valenzuela, his next-door neighbor. Rizal was always welcome at the Valenzuela home. He eventually courted Leonor by sending her love notes, which he wrote in invisible ink made from a mixture of water and table salt. He taught Leonor how to read his letters, by heating them over a lamp or a candle to allow the words to surface. Unfortunately, as with his first love, Jose failed to ask for the lady's hand in marriage. Leonor Rivera was a cousin of Rizal. Leonor was tender as a budding flower with kindly, wistful eyes. She and Rizal eventually became engaged. In her letters, she used an alias in order to hide their relationship from her parents. In the autumn of 1890, however, Rizal received a letter from Leonor, telling him of her engagement to a man of her mother's choosing, and begged for his forgiveness. This broke Rizal's heart. In 1882, when Rizal was a student at the Universidad Central de Madrid, he frequented the home of Don Pablo Ortiga y Rey, the former mayor of Manila. Don Pablo lived with his son Rafael and his daughter Consuelo. Though he wasn't a handsome man, Rizal possessed a great deal of charisma, and was gifted with many talents and a deeply noble character. Being lonely and somewhat isolated in a foreign country, Rizal found comfort in Consuelo's vivacious company. He wrote her a poem in which he expressed his great admiration for her. But Rizal's romance with Consuelo did not turn into a serious affair. He decided to take a step back for 2 reasons. First, he was still engaged to Leonor Rivera at the time. And second, he was aware of his friend's affection for Consuelo and he did not want to ruin their friendship over her. When Rizal was in Tokyo in 1888, he spotted a pretty Japanese girl walking past the consulate gate. He was captured by her regal air and charisma and tried to find ways to meet her. The girl's name was Seiko Usui. She lived with her parents and often took afternoon walks by the consulate. Rizal waited by the gate one afternoon and introduced himself. Rizal and Ose-san, as he fondly called her, met almost daily. He was her first love. Because of his deep affection for her, Rizal was almost tempted to settle down in Japan. But he had set his sights on other matters. His 45-day sojourn in Japan was one of the happiest interludes in his life. To think that I am leaving this life for the uncertain, the unknown, Rizal wrote in his diary. To you I dedicate the final chapter of these memoirs of my youth. No woman like you has ever loved me. In May 1888, Rizal visited London for a short time, boarding the house of the Beckett family. The eldest daughter was Gertrude. Gertrude fell in love with Rizal and gave him all of her attention during the family picnics and gatherings. When Rizal stayed indoors during rainy days painting and sculpting, She helped him mix his colors and prepare his clay. Rizal enjoyed her company. Eventually their flirtatious friendship drifted towards a blossoming romance. He affectionately called her Getty, and in return she called him Petty. But Rizal withdrew before his relationship with Getty could become more serious, realizing that he had a greater mission to fulfill. And if he were to accomplish it, he could not marry her. He decided to leave so that she may forget him. Before he did, however, he finished a number of sculptural works, including a carving inspired by the Beckett sisters. On January 28, 1890, Rizal left for Brussels. His landlady had a daughter, Suzanne. She was taken by Rizal's charm and chivalry, and provided him good company. Rizal could have flirted with her, but he was still engaged to Leonor at the time. Suzanne fell in love with Rizal, and wept when he left for Madrid in July 1890. She wrote to him in French, "Where are you now? Do you think of me once in a while? I feel very unhappy thinking that perhaps I might never see you again. Aren't you going to write to me?" In 1891, Rizal took a vacation in Biarritz in order to find reprieve from his troubles in Madrid. He was a guest of the Bousted family. Mr. and Mrs. Bousted had two beautiful daughters, Adelina and Nellie. After having lamented his frustrated romance with Leonor Rivera on account of her engagement to another man, Rizal came to develop considerable affection for Nellie, Mr. Bousted's younger daughter. He found her to be intelligent, morally upright, and full of life. Rizal wrote to his closest friends about his intention to marry her. With much encouragement from his friends, Rizal wooed Nellie, who also returned his affections. Rizal's marriage proposal failed for two reasons. First, Nellie demanded that he give up his Catholic faith and become a Protestant like her. Rizal did not like this idea. Second, Nellie's mother did not approve of Rizal, as she had no desire to entrust her daughter to a man who was poor and persecuted in his own country. Rizal and Nellie parted as friends. Rizal's exile in Dapitan was one of the worst periods of his life. The death of Leonor Rivera in August 1893 left a gaping void in his heart. Josephine Bracken arrived on the shores of Dapitan, accompanying her blind adoptive father. No ophthalmologist in Hong Kong, their home country, could cure the man's blindness, and so they sought the services of the famous Dr. Jose Rizal. Rizal and Josephine's romantic interlude went on for about a month, after which they decided to marry. When Mr. Teuffer heard of this, he became so enraged at the thought of losing his daughter, that he attempted to kill himself with a razor to his throat. Rizal prevented this tragedy by holding the man's wrists back. Josephine left with her father on the first available steamer to Manila. His blindness was incurable. After some time, Josephine returned to Dapitan. Since no priest would marry them, Rizal and Josephine held hands, exchanged vows, and married themselves before God. Rizal and Josephine lived together in Dapitan as husband and wife, and in early 1896 they were expecting a baby. A little boy of 8 months was born, who lived for only 3 hours. Rizal named him Francisco in honor of his father, and buried the child in Dapitan.